afternoon and welcome to episode 5. This one is Citizenship in Conversation, and I am joined by Cheyenne, Annabelle and Nicole, some of my former students from years gone by. Today, the purpose of it is to bring to light what citizenship is in the classroom so they can tell you all of the brilliant things that they learned and how that has prepared them for later lives. Guys, are we doing okay? Are we okay, everyone?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. I think it's really, really important that we highlight the impact that citizenship education has, or really raise the profile of what citizenship in the classroom can actually do for us. And what I want to do is just start today just by letting everybody know why you chose citizenship. So when we looked at our options process, what feels like a lifetime ago now, why was citizenship that subject that you put on that option form and said, yes, that's a subject that we want to do? Bearing in mind that we'd never had it at our school before, so there's no other pupils to look at, or there no other pupils to question about. So Cheyenne, if I start with you, what made you sort of opt for citizenship?
Personally, the main reason I picked citizenship was because of how much knowledge I could get about the country that I live in. You get to learn about the laws and your rights and political issues, which not only made me more comfortable living here as a relatively recent immigrant, but also helped me form my own opinions about these issues. And all in all, I feel like the citizenship as the subject, as GCSE, it helps make a person more well-rounded and just helping them further participate in the future of the country.
Brilliant. I mean, it's really important that you mentioned that coming from a different country, it's one of those subjects where you can actually see about what the country's like, and like you said, that country that you're now living in, and sort of the rights that you'll sort of experience whilst you are here. Same question to you, Annabelle.
At the time, I was really interested in pursuing a career in law and politics, and it was sort of the closest thing that we offered to exploring that more at the time.
Okay. So where would you say it ranked on terms of your options if you have, so we do like a 3-option block. Out of the 3 subjects that you chose, where was citizenship in terms of that? Was it sort of the top or the middle, or?
Was my first option out of the ones we got to pick from. Yeah.
Amazing. And Nicole, same question to you.
I didn't really know much about the subject. I had not looked much into it, and there wasn't much information available, of course, because no other year had done it before. And I really just wanted to learn more about the subject and then dive into the topics we did and learn more about our country, as Cheyenne said, because it seemed really interesting to me to learn about our country and our values.
Yeah, and it's one of these subjects that we can bring to life in all manner of subjects and topics. It's that real life exposure. If you open your phone, if you go onto social media, if you go into a news app, if you go on the radio, if you go on the TV, anything that's on there, and we demonstrated that in our lessons, didn't we? That we'd have that 5 minutes where we could say, well, what's in the news and how can we apply what we've learned, or how could we apply what we will learn to topic X or topics Y, etc. So if I asked you the question, and I hope I know the answer to this one, but if I said, would you choose it again if you could rewind the clock and go back to year 9, if you had that X like a ballot form and ticking your option choices, would you choose citizenship again, Cheyenne?
Well, I initially picked a different subject before switching to citizenship. So yes, I would pick citizenship first.
Yeah, so it would be one of your first choices now rather than something like you'd have to switch to later on. Yeah. Annabelle, would you tick yes straight away?
Yeah, like without a doubt, it was great.
Fabulous. Nicole?
Same with Cheyenne. I had it in a reserve, and I think instead of having the other subject, I would have chose citizenship straight away because of all the stuff I've learned, all the knowledge I've gained from it.
Okay, I'll stay with you then, Nicole. If we go on to all that knowledge and all of the topics that we've looked at, what would you say is the standout lesson for you? What skill or topic or piece of information have you taken away from citizenship that you've then taken with you into sort of later studies?
I think learning about the Human Rights Act and the Magna Carta and the Equality Act was one of the best things I ever learned, because it's just so important to be taught that. You might not be taught it at school. Like people I know wouldn't have been taught that in their other schools, but we had the opportunity to be taught that. And I think it's really important to learn what your values are and what you have a right to. And same with like learning about hate crimes, especially with what's happening in the news these days, learning about that and how those things can protect you in life is just so important.
Absolutely. So have you taken something from citizenship and gone on to sort of study it academically in your current placement at college?
I do psychology at college, which we kind of dipped into in some of our topics at citizenship. But I think it was more for me learning about everyday life rather than applying it to college. So I'd rather have that as my own knowledge and use it for intellectual opinions rather than study it further.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just important to me
I
that I
think
still have that.
I think you mentioned that word opinion, Cheyenne, didn't you? And how have you? 'Cause I know you haven't gone into sort of the law, politics, or sort of business route. You're off studying medicine, aren't you? So how have you taken what you've learned in citizenship, and what sort of lessons stood out for you, and how have you applied that to your everyday life now?
No, yeah, I haven't done anything remotely related to law or politics or anything like that. But I still feel like citizenship has been a huge aspect of well, myself these days, because I'm going into medicine, and the last thing we did in citizenship was the active citizenship part, which combined your own opinions and like team building elements into something you campaigning for. And I feel like that's ridiculously important. Doesn't no matter what field you go into, because it gives you the qualities to be with a team of like-minded or not like-minded people.
Yeah, I mean, would you advocate that everybody should be playing a part in society and everyone should be sort of having that opinion about a topic, no matter what that might be? Because it's what we've got to look at in everyday society, isn't it? That either it's right or it's wrong, but everyone has an opinion on a topic of the day. So has that prepared you for sort of topics that are currently in and around the news?
Yes, definitely, because the UK and other countries as well, obviously, are democracy. It's ridiculously important to have these opinions, and it's more important to not just only have these opinions but also act on them. And that can be just as a discussion among your friends rather than campaigning for them. But I think yes, it is important for people to have those opinions.
Fabulous, thank you. And Annabelle, what would be the standout lesson for you, and how have you transferred that into sort of your current everyday life?
So I really enjoyed being taught about how to understand different countries and how they work. We did a lot on different democracies in like other countries, and it's really helped gain a greater understanding of national and international news and politics. I found it much easier to follow the news and like current affairs recently with everything because of that, and because we're more politically literate. Um, yeah.
Yeah, if I stay with you then, Annabelle, if we're then looking at, you're saying there that you now have an understanding of what's going on in the world, both sort of here in the UK and across other countries. If we looked at the, things that have gone by recently about the American election, about the American Capitol riots, things that are in the news every day, we can sort of look at them in citizenship and assess, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Why is it a good thing? Why is it a bad thing? How does that affect you said, democracy? How it affects their democracy. But if you're then looking at giving people advice going forward, if you had a year 9 pupil or someone that was looking at taking their option choices, would you advocate citizenship as an option for them? And if so, why would you say yes to that?
Yeah, I think it would be a brilliant option for anybody to take. It gave us so many different opportunities to see the world, not just in our classroom, but we did things. We went to London, didn't we? And we met different people and learned things. And I also thought it was really important that we got taught how we could make change, not just through voting or like
To election.
protest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, especially as a young person in today's society.
Absolutely. I mean, Cheyenne, if go back to you, you said that you were new to the country, so seeing things outside the classroom, you know, Annabelle mentioned there about the trip to London, the House of Parliament. How was that for you, and how sort of how vital was that to you to understand what was going on in our country?
Thing is, it's great in order to learn about those things in the classroom. Like, we got taught a lot about like how courts worked and how the House of Parliaments work, like the Commons and Lords. But it's much more important to actually go out there and see them, just so you have that image in your mind of what it actually is, rather than what you've just been taught.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that we can, and that's the whole point of citizenship. Is that layering up of this is how it works in the classroom, this is how it works out in society, this is how it works in the news, this is how it works abroad, this is how it's different. And I think it's really important there for people to see that this is a subject that not only do you learn it in the classroom, but if you, like I said, if you switch onto social media, if you switch to the news on, citizenship will apply to most, if not all, of the stories there that are in that current day. Nicole, would you or could you offer any sort of budding citizenship pupils some advice on whether or not they should have that as on their option form or not?
I would say, well, of course, and definitely, because it's more than just learning in a classroom. It's more than just learning to just gain a GCSE. It's something that is applicable to real life, and it gives you more of understanding of the media and what to trust and what not to trust. And I think it's important that we learn the importance of voting, because everyone has this right to vote. For a very long time, we've learned that we have this right to vote, and we should take advantage of that to live in a country where we have these rights. And then it's important to know that other countries that might not have these rights. So
Yeah, absolutely.
We get that opportunity, and we should appreciate it.
I mean, you mentioned there specifically about taking it as a GCSE, but if I then flipped it and said, do you think that everybody, regardless of whether it was a citizenship GCSE, whether it was just sort of your key stage 4, year 10, year 11, and an exam, do you think that everybody sort of from year 7 or even sort of in primary schools should have that sort of introduction to citizenship?
I think it's important for everyone to have it, not just to take it as a GCSE, because you learn what kind of country you live in. Some people don't have that opportunity, and just learning about how the process works, how bills are passed, how they make, like, politics makes your life better if you live in this sort of country, and how you have that right to say, like, freedom of speech. It's important to know what you have and what you don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Annabelle, same question to you there. Would you like to fight? I mean, like Cheyenne said there, the active citizenship project that we do as part of our course allows you to take an issue that you feel really passionate about and sort of run with it. But would you again sort of like to see it with everybody from sort of year 7 upwards, even like I said, down to primary schools up over?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that citizenship is so transferable into real life, as Nicole said, that you don't really get in other subjects. And we've all got a voice, and I think it's important we know how to use that. And the projects, as you've said, helped us do that. And yeah, important.
And Cheyenne, if we go back to you, if you know, before you came to this country, if you had the option to have learned what we did, and so you had that insight into this country, do you think that it should be something that everybody is taught? I mean, did you have something similar where you were from, like in your home country? Was there anything there that sort of introduced you to sort of the political side there, or sort of the rights that you would have?
Yeah, back in Pakistan, we had this subject. Sorry, we had this subject called Pak Studies, which basically the geography and the history of the country. And citizenship is kind of related to that, as in it's more just like the history of politics and law. But I think that it was definitely more important because if I had known about citizenship before coming to this country, and I would have learned more about it, I would have definitely been more comfortable here rather than how I started out.
Yeah. So again, would you like to see it for everybody? Would you like to see it just as an option subject again, or do you think it's important that everybody, regardless of whether it is an option or not, should have that exposure to the subject?
I think it's more important that everybody does it rather than just the people who pick it as options, because these days we get most of our news from social media and stuff, and there's a lot of like false information in there. And if everyone did citizenship as a subject, they'd have the opportunity to research some of their opinions and like fact check this information independently rather than just like absorbing that through social media.
Yeah. So if I said to you then, as a sort of parting question, what would you like to see going forward? What change would you say is needed? And that could be citizenship based, or it could just be sort of how this applies to a GCSE or as sort of a whole school, whole sort of educational system in the United Kingdom. How would you like to see that happen, or what change would you like to see initiated? I'll just open the floor to anyone that might have an opinion on that question. I'm going to drop that bombshell on you.
Thanks.
What would you like to see? How would you like to see people use their active citizenship to make and enforce change?
Using their voices mostly. So using their freedom of speech to stand up against what they believe in. So there's if there's something happening in your country that you need it changing and other people believe you, then you can start a petition to pass a law. And that is something that is just incredible as someone who doesn't really have much of a voice in politics. The people still have that chance to pass laws indirectly through petitions.
Yeah, and I think that's really important that you're saying that you need to have your voice heard, and it's really important that change, even a really small local level, is just as important again as a national level. You know, if we think back to our active citizenship projects, that if we create a change in our community, you know, for us that's a massive win because we're affecting somebody and we're changing things for the better. You know, if we then went national, great, we're still doing the same thing but just on a bigger scale. So yeah, I think yeah, using your voice and using it sort of appropriately. But as you mentioned before, Nicole, it's that exposure to, you know, what your rights are in respect to protesting, and that you know that you can't use them violently, but you know how to contain them and use them in the most appropriate way. Cheyenne or Annabelle, have you got any sort of comments to chip in on that?
I'll say something. Yeah, just going off what Nicole just said, I think it's definitely important for people to have their voices heard, because active citizenship doesn't mean lobbying, or doesn't just mean lobbying or going house to house canvassing. It could just be having a conversation with a friend or posting something on social media about something you feel passionate about. I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am going to plug myself here, and I'll say if any of you have got any issues or topics, my previous podcast, episode 4, was with Stuart Lawrence. You can have a look at that on YouTube and on the podcasting stations on Spotify. It is the hashtag silence is not an option, and that is something that we will continue to raise about getting the equality that everybody deserves, regardless of the colour of your skin, regardless of your sexuality, regardless of your religion, that we are all equal. It doesn't matter where you have come from, where you've been brought up, that, you know, it's something that we are passionate about and we are trying to drive through. So thank you, Cheyenne, for that. It's a nice little easy plug in to plug myself, if that's a way through. It's like that's getting a presenter on and getting them to give them a cheeky advert. But it's really important that we have conversations like these. And, you know, yes, we are talking about citizenship education, but this is in fact, you know, an active citizenship project that everybody should be exposed to this subject, in my opinion. It doesn't matter whether you are a free school, if you're an academy, it's a subject that everybody should have exposure to, because, you know, here in this room itself is, we've got people that are going on to study something that is similar in terms of law, but we've got subjects that are not related, like medicine. But it, like you said, it allows you there to have that sort of interaction with each other, but also that real life exposure to real life issues that when you get to the ages of 18, once you go off into the real world, you know about voting, you know about elections, you know about how our system works, how our country works, how the court system works. You know, even things like if you get on to do jury service at some point, you know all about how that works and how that process works. And from a teaching point of view, I think it's really important that, young people like yourselves are exposed to that information, so that it's not a shock, that it's not a case of, I don't know, therefore I don't care. All three of you can go forward in life and have an opinion with evidence to back it up. And as I think it was you, Cheyenne, that mentioned at the start there about that, being able to justify your point of view to somebody. And above all else, that's the biggest thing that we could do. I mean, Annabelle, if we're looking at sort of that real life situation, you were part of the mock trial system, weren't you, that we did way back then?
Years ago.
How did that come about for you, and how important was that for you? Why did you apply to that, and what did you get out of that situation?
Mock trials. Well, yeah, at the time, as I said earlier, I was really, really interested in law and a career in possibly becoming a lawyer or solicitor. And mock trials, honestly, it was invaluable, that experience. We got to see it. We got to see what it would be like to be in a courtroom, which I know it's not necessarily the same as if it was real life, but it could have been. And that was really, really interesting, and we learned the process of it. And also the confidence we got from that, because it's not every day you get to stand up in a courtroom with however many people in it and say what you've got to say. That was, really, really invaluable, that experience.
Yeah, and again, it's that, that thing that we've been speaking about all afternoon, that it's that experience to have it outside of the classroom, that yes, you know what a judge does, yes, you know what a magistrate does, yes, you know what a solicitor does or a barrister does, but then when you adapt that role and you become one yourself and you have to put yourself in that shoes, together with what Cheyenne was saying there about sort of team building, sort of that sort of close-knit working together on a project, and understanding again how it appears in practice and how it appears in theory, together, we can look at how that goes forward. But yeah, I mean, one of the main things that I wanted to do with that mock trials was show you this is how it applies once you leave school, once you have got that GCSE, once you've got that qualification. This is what you could do with it, and it's that first springboard to a potential career. Certainly something good for your CV that you have done something like that. But going forward then, how do you think citizenship will apply for you? The knowledge that you've taken from the subject, how do you think it will apply for you for at least the next 2 or 3 years? What sort of things have you sort of seen in the news where because of citizenship, you've then gone, I understand that, and how will it then transfer going forward for you? Again, anyone's free to answer that question. It's not a specific one for any of you.
Well, we learned a lot about how the voting system worked and how the voting system works in the UK, the first past the post system. And well, I'm 17 years old. I'm going to be able to vote in a year. And that is quite important to know just exactly how your vote is going to be used in the future.
Yeah.
And further elections and referendums.
If we then look at COVID, then what sort of topics can you attach from COVID and also the news briefings that you've seen across the country, both in England and far and wide? How can you transfer what you've learned in the classroom again to something real life situation there?
Is that referring to devolution?
It is, yes. Well done. It's almost like an informal lesson, yeah. So devolution there is a massive part of our sort of democracy, and how we allow sort of those nations to have that independence, if you would, and having those devolved powers, but also whilst we still retain the powers at Westminster ourselves. So we've seen things like the education, how that's affected in sort of Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as in England. We've also looked at how they are dealing with healthcare and sort of the current quarantine situation that's going on across the 4 nations here. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that you can see there that the information that you learned then is real, and it's something that you shouldn't just skip past, because as we keep going back to it, it's about having that opinion. And it doesn't matter what your opinion is on that. If you can justify it, if you can back up and say, I think X because, then you're going to have that validity, and you're going to have that sort of that constructive argument or that constructive conversation with somebody, and having, I think someone mentioned the confidence, just to approach a subject and having that, if you're ever sort of talking to people and they're having a conversation that you don't know about, it's quite awkward if you don't know what they are talking about. And, politics, political literacy, media literacy, citizenship in general should be one of those conversations that everybody has knowledge of, that if you hear the word democracy, they know what you're talking about. If you hear the word election, they know what you're talking about. Because directly or indirectly, we're all affected by it every day, without us even knowing. I mean, if you go to the park, if you go to down a road, if you enter sort of a place, you might have bylaws in place that say you can only enter there between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. or parking restrictions, things like that, that you think, well, how have they done that? Why have they done that? We look at sort of the locality of it, and we look at how sort of local elections take place and what local councils do. So for me, of course, I'm going to say that everybody should do it, but it's really nice to hear that your opinion there sort of backs up the whole idea of what citizenship education is about. Has anyone got any parting comments before we say goodbye to everybody? Any lasting comments?
I think it's also nice to say that it gives you an easier way to form an intellectual opinion, rather than just what Shia said, absorbing what you hear from the media.
Yeah.
So you can go on to research your own thing if you don't believe that it's true. So it's not just like you're believing everything the media say. You need to take it upon yourself to challenge that and see if it's true before.
Yeah, you've almost just took that word right out of my mouth, Nicole. That it's that challenging, and it's not argumentative. It's that if you hear something that is inaccurate, it's having that ability just to challenge somebody and say, well, why? And in the previous podcast that we did with Stuart Lawrence, the big thing that he said is just ask somebody why. Ask them a question, ask them why do they have that opinion? Why do they have that thought? Because after every time they've said something, if you keep saying why, and after maybe 2-3 attempts of that, they have no evidence, they have no argument, then the strength of their argument isn't sort of that deep. So you can kind of look at, I don't think X should happen, why? And if they can't argue that point, and I think it's really important that you say that confidence just to stand up and, stand up for our rights and stand up for things that are perhaps wrong and shouldn't be happening. And it's all our responsibility to make sure that the world exists in a friendly and productive way, that we should challenge these behaviors where we see something that's wrong. It's not for people who are black to challenge, racism. It's not for people who are from different religions to challenge people's views or words or terminology that are used. We are all here. And I kind of feel like the inspector calls that we are all responsible for each other, and that we need to exist together. Otherwise, we'll learn a lesson the hard way. Cheyenne, have you got any sort of closing comments other than #DoCitizenship?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Pretty much it. No, I mean, I would like to say thank you all. I know you've given up your time this afternoon to sort of to give me your sort of thoughts and insights on what citizenship is to you and how useful you found it. But yeah, I mean, what you'll find across everywhere, I hope, is that citizenship is a subject that should be done. Citizenship is something that we will endeavour to have in every classroom in some capacity. And as long as young people like you are driving that at the same time, even if you're not studying the subject still, then we're going to go a long way to get that to where we need to be. But yes, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I would just like to put a caveat on there that if anyone else has any thoughts or any more opinions on today's episode, you can use the #CUSEpi5 and also use the #citizenshipinconversation. Once again, thank you so much for coming this afternoon, guys. I have had an absolute blast catching up with you. And it's really nice to hear that, at least from our point of view, that your experience of the subject was worthwhile and you are using that in a productive manner. But until next time, thank you for listening.